You're listening to Learn How to Podcast with Natascha Moy and the Power of Podcasting. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to get guests. So this is actually quite an interesting thing to do because guests are obviously important, especially if you are going to be interviewing people on a particular topic and you want to have the best. So I host a lot of podcasts and I've done a lot of radio shows, and obviously if you are working for an organization, it is a lot easier to get really great guests because they're all looking for coverage, and so they're happy to hop on. But I've been in both places. I've been, in a position where I've fronted for radio station and therefore been able to kind of get guests on the basis of the fact that they have a lot of listeners. And then I've also done it for myself where I've put up podcast and that hasn't had the backing of a radio station. Both have some very different kind of responses, but it depends on how much people want to talk about what they're doing. So my experience is that when you first start a podcast, you look at what I call low-hanging fruit. Low-hanging fruit means that ideally, you're starting a podcast with a topic that you know a lot about, either in business or as a hobby or as something that's entertaining. But you will most likely know a lot of people in that industry anyway. So my go-to are always my best friends, people who I know are top of their game and who really, really like me, and therefore will be willing to sit for an hour and be interviewed and know that I'm going to do generally a good job. So they feel that the experience, while maybe it doesn't have an amazing audience to start off with, will be fun for them and they're doing me a favor. So I do tend to kind of use a little bit of my low-hanging fruit and a little bit of my sort of, come on, you'd love to do it and it would be so great for me. And in return, I can do, babysitting or something else for you. But this is something that is really important. So I have had in the past podcasts where I've run out of guests or I've run out of options. I've done 50, 60, 100 people, and also maybe potentially left it a little bit late because I tend to not be as organized as some other people are. In the beginning, I go to the 3 people that I know really well. Then I actually ask them to introduce me to other people who might be fantastic. Now, you might have some great friends who are happy to share, and I will always share my contacts with everyone, but I have friends who don't and who like to keep their contacts for themselves and therefore might not be happy to hand over and let you have a chat to whoever they know. So you need to then also use things like your LinkedIn and your Facebook. I use social media. I wouldn't use Instagram. That is probably not where I would go for things like this. But Facebook, I have, I think, 4,500 people on Facebook. So I use it quite a lot to mine for guests and to mine for information. LinkedIn is something similar as well. There you have an expert. I think I probably have, a couple of thousand or something on LinkedIn. I don't use it as often, but that's a great place to reach out for guests in a particular area and a particular topic. You're also going to be distributing your podcasts into these places. If you don't have a big social media profile, then what you need to probably do is look at approaching PR agents who might be interested in helping you, or using something like a resource like Source Bottle, where you can hop on and actually call out for guests in certain areas. And then you've got to kind of work out who's good and who isn't good. So don't just interview anyone, because some of them are crazy and some of them are amazing. So just choose the person that you think will fit with what you're doing. But ideally, you don't want to start off with the best person that you can think of. So if I have some very well-known friends or people, I would always schedule them for between 3 to 8 in terms of my interview process. Number 1 would be someone who I'm very comfortable with and who's a good name and also has a nice profile themselves, but certainly it wouldn't be the most well known in that area. They would be somebody who is, a little bit more for me, I would imagine, than for everyone else. So getting guests is really important. And the other thing that's really important about getting guests is doing your research and working out who they are and what they do. So don't do what I did, which was, ask a famous sports star, because I heard he was a famous sports star, to be on my podcast and then discovered that he was actually up for domestic abuse. And I hadn't done enough research. I'd just seen someone who was media savvy and reached out, and that was I didn't interview them in the end, but that was probably a disaster on my part. And you want to make sure that whoever it is really going to tick the boxes. I have had disasters in the past where I've interviewed people who have supposedly supposed to be remarkable, and I've discovered through the interview process that actually they're not really that remarkable. They are potentially living in a level of denial, or they're using the opportunity to, I don't know, promote or produce something that is not necessarily themselves. You really want to be able to get people who are authentic and who come with some kind of business or theme pedigree. That's really important to have for your podcast. So make sure that your guest selection is very good. And when you work with me, so I coach and I do one-to-one and I do workshops. When you work with me, we write down the first 6 guests that you're going to have, so that we can really think through who they are and what they do and who you're going to get. And I always say, try and choose someone who's alive, because that is kind of important for the podcast, not who you want to eat at the table with. And some of them are no longer around. So this is kind of important, that you look at your guest selection and also make sure that you have enough guests for the entire series that you intend to do, that you can pull. And there's not only 3 people in the genre that you want to talk around. You want to have, 300 people that you could potentially draw from. And also people who are going to love the experience and want to share it, because them sharing it is actually a way for you to get a bigger audience. So you want to be able to hook onto that and promote yourself that way. So yes, getting guests, it's not necessarily the easiest, but it's very doable. And the other thing as well is I also use my podcasts as a way to connect with people that I might want to do business with. Sometimes you can't get in to have a chat to somebody, but often you can reach out to them and ask them to appear on your podcast, and you can then do it from that point of view. So get them onto the podcast. It's a really nice interplay in terms of, the power of the communication, and then you can pitch them your idea. So I have also done that in the past. It's a really great way to really get insights into who you might want to do business with and how you want to go about doing that. So, getting guests, and hop onto powerofpodcasting.com.au if you want to book a discovery call, or just subscribe to potentially hop onto a workshop later on. Or you can discuss, you can have a chat to me and we can talk about your podcast and what you want to do with it. I love getting them up and going. I'm doing this podcast to help you, but I'd love to work with you as well. And I will be back with some more fantastic and interesting podcast stories and tips and tricks.